This is weekly recap number one of the Color and Collage workshop for summer 2023. And I want to try to make these recaps after every class so that the students can see what we went over in a more consolidated fashion in order to review at their leisure if they want, and just to have it all in one place because we do a lot at once in that class. So the first thing we went over was basically the Joseph Albers method, and I introduced this book of Joseph Albers and his general tact. And then we did a little color and words project, basically just creating a new relationship between color and words. And then we went over a little materials and workflow method. And then we did the first exercise from the Albers book, making one color appear as two. And through that, we started to get to know and have a better sense of what these terms are that help us define color, such as hue, intensity, and value. And one of the fun things or exciting things that came out of that was that color can be spatial and is quite sensitive. That space and the illusion of space is quite sensitive to the parameters of color. So I'm going to go over each of these briefly so that we have a little review of them. So the class is loosely based on Joseph Albers' book, Interaction of Color, which is kind of this famous reference and is taught definitely throughout the United States, and was a book that I had in school and many of my peers had. So it's kind of a good reference point and an interesting place to start in learning about color. And his idea coming out of the Bauhaus, when he taught this class for many years in Yale, at Yale University, is that color is relative and that it is one of the most relative, relational and fickle and mercurial formal qualities of art and visual experience. In other words, it can change very easily depending what is next to it and its quantity. And within that general umbrella, his idea is that in order to learn this, in order to learn to see this and to have an intuition about it through practice, is to work with colored paper and putting colored paper next to each other, and often just very simple small rectangles, because what becomes very quickly apparent is that color is distracted. That if there's any kind of curves or extraneous solutions to the creative challenges that we face when making art, the color can quickly, the color relationships can be easy not to be seen, or easily not seen. So therefore, if we use simple rectangles, we'll be able to see how color is functioning more easily, is what I'm trying to say here. But yeah, and so that's his general tact. And within that, I want to show that color is difficult to describe. And so on the left, I have the color red searched on Google, and on the right, I have the color rojo searched on Google, on my own Google computer, my Google site. And it's just to show, when we think of the color red, whether it's Coca-Cola red or some other red, some like Chevy Impala red, or whatever the red is, that we all come up with many variations in our mind. And so color has a way of escaping being pinned down. And so to elucidate that further, we did a little color and word exercise where each student was given 4 colors in a very close range of hue. So like, let's say 4 shades of blue, and they were allowed to only look at one of them. And then they were asked to describe that with several words, 6 to 10 words or phrases. And then all the colors were shown to a partner, and the words were shown, and the partner's goal was to guess from those words which color the student had been writing about. And this was just to hone in on the fact that there's only, like, I can't remember what it is, 30 to 60 words about color that we use in our normal parlance, in our normal lexicon. And that's quite paltry for the infinite shades, and it's difficult to describe, and often we bring up poetic terms in order to try to describe a particular shade of color, such as the we say the water at a medium depth, or swimming pool in the sun, or Italian tiles, or blue jay, or eggplant. These are different words that came up in class. Edge of night, grapes, papaya, but with the caveat that it has ripe flesh, right? So these are attempts to bring to mind a very subtle, shifty thing like color. This is just an example of what happens when we start to see all these shades within a particular hue. If we apply that to a painting, this is a painting from Mexico, from Teotihuacan, from the pyramids near Mexico City, a fresco. And I just wanted to show what happens to our sense of an image when we start to pay attention to subtle hue shifts. It can really bring alive artwork and the world for ourselves. Then I went over briefly like a working method for the class. Because the class is quite tight, it's really nice to have a an efficient means of trying out different cut up paper and pasted paper. And so the idea I talked about as a palette is to create strips of all of your colors that you're going to use, and that way you can quickly reference one color next to another color. Because otherwise, and you might just have to learn this by doing, but if it becomes disorganized quite quickly, and you end up kind of chasing for the color, spending the whole class trying to find the right color, which is the point, but it can become far more fun if you have a succinct way of doing that. So I highly suggest creating these strips of paper that will act as like a palette that you can open up, and when you can match colors against your other sheets of paper. The other tip I wanted to give is when we glue them, to when you get home, lay something heavy on top so that the piece you made remains flat. And the third tip, I guess, would be that you can use a credit card or a piece of plastic to burnish the paper with the glue, and we'll talk about that more in class. So the first Albers exercise, make one color appear as two, was we began that, and we'll work on it more again next class. But basically, for those of you who weren't there, the idea is that, like on the slide on the left, you have purple and yellow on the bottom of that slide. So those are two different colors, but the green squares on top are the same color, but they appear different. And so we're just learning that through quantity and positioning, color can change drastically. And often if in our mind we say, oh, I need a red, and we reach for a red, that could be misleading. That maybe it might be nice to think about, well, I have a lot of orange here. What would a little bit of red do to that orange? Or what would that orange do to a little bit of red? And then the whole process can become far more intertwined and really playful when we start to deal with color. So that's all we started to do, is just play with patches of color that are the same on top of two colors that are different. These are other examples where two colors that were the same kind of middle orange appeared different on two brighter and darker red oranges. Now within that, we had an exciting thing happen where one of the students saw that what happens is spatially, color can change how the illusion functions in an artwork. So in a flat image. So the student asked, well, it appears to me that the green is above the purple in this situation, and that maybe this is behind, and maybe it acts like a window, and that through subtly adjusting either the background or the foreground, we can create space. So I have these slides because one idea is you could imagine, oh, I drop a ball through a ball can drop through the painting, right, into this kind of infinite space. Or you could say that the ball could drop through and just hit a piece of wood just below the square. Or you kind of start to be subtle about your metaphor for how the space is really working. And to bring that home to painting, we can say here that this is Corot's painting from another class I'm teaching. And this is a class example where, do these windows appear to recede beyond the picture plane? Like, first of all, he's able to position this black far in space, right? So we can walk down this road and then we get to this window. So this doesn't sit right up on the picture plane, and neither does the windmill, but it starts to pull forward. And then how deep a space is that? Or this color shift? And you can start to read paintings as the ability for the color to move forward or backwards, depending on what's next to it. So this is an excellent example of seeing that. So this shape here, this is a piece of light blue. And I'm sure in person, this whole sky might have more subtlety that is making it react the way that I'm talking about. But so like this little piece of blue seems to pull forward a little bit, and this piece of blue seems to sit back more. And then you can come to even shadow. So this piece of gray cream color, is that sitting behind here, or is it sitting even behind this area? And so this is the idea, is we're starting to play with space and color. And this is just for fun. This is a Rachel White-Reed sculpture in England, where she took a mold of a house from the inside and then took the house off of it. And I'm just kind of bringing to light just how much mileage you can get out of inside versus outside, and opacity, and kind of a remnant of space. So then briefly, I just want to go over the terms, which is kind of the most difficult thing to describe right now, but I think don't work too hard on it. It'll just become apparent as we work with this colored paper. But basically, we have three kind of points on a triangle that we're moving back and forth every time we choose colors. We have hue, which is simply the chroma, or the color as we name it, red, blue, or yellow, or green, or whatever color we're talking about. And then we have saturation, which is the degree of intensity. And like when we think of the color wheel, or when we think of Coca-Cola red, that's usually maximal intensity and saturation. And then that saturation can be dumbed down, you could say, or it could be taken out or grayed. And then we have value, which is simply light to dark. So this yellow is lighter than this red, and like that. So this is just another slide saying the same things, but using some Spanish words. These are your different colors, your different hues. This is your value. And this is something that's being desaturated from right to left. And this is something that's being desaturated from left to right, right? You have 100% saturation here, and it's been grayed down. So in terms of like an example from class, perhaps this seems maybe a little less saturated than this color. This is darker than this color. This is probably the maximal saturation in this piece. And then this is just, there's many ways to represent the color wheel, and it can be helpful for some students, and it can be just kind of distracting to think about it. But basically the idea is you have your primaries, and they're different for different cultures and historically, but often in the United States for the last 50 years or so, red, yellow, and blue has been the main way of thinking about the primaries. And then when you mix blue and yellow, you're going to get a green. And when you mix red and yellow, you get an orange. When you mix red and blue, you get a purple. And those are your secondaries, and onward. Munsell's color system, if you want to get a little more advanced, is a really great way of thinking about color, and uses all the three terms I've been describing to help us choose and see colors. This is just a really good slide for beginners to see, like, all we're doing here is we're desaturating to black and white. That's all saturation is. So you take black and white and you saturate it, and you're going to get color. You take color and you desaturate it, and you're going to get a tonal black and white image on the right. Also, in a slightly more advanced way of thinking about saturation, is you can add white and it'll be desaturated towards a lighter value. You can add black and it'll be desaturated towards a darker value, right? But we're changing our value, but we're also changing our saturation from a very intense hue to not only a darker hue, but also a less saturated one. And then you can also add gray to a color, or you could add its complement to a color to desaturate. You can add any color to a color, actually, to desaturate it from its original intense hue. This is another slide to help us understand this. White on one end, black on the other, and you have your most intense magenta, and you're desaturating it towards black, and you're desaturating it towards white. So you're losing intensity, you're changing the value, and you could also say you're changing the color or the hue, especially if we're talking about adding a color on one side. So that's it for talking about the first color class. It was really fun meeting everybody, and I'm looking forward to working together next week.